All right. What's going on, everyone? And welcome to a very special episode of the Nate Hates Boring People podcast. This episode is pre-recorded, so do whatever you want in the comments. I will not be there to see it. I don't care what you have to say, and we won't pay attention because this happened either a day ago or a week ago. I haven't decided when I was going to release this yet. So today we have Carson Gross. You may know him as HTMX_org. You may know him as The Professor. You may know him as the guy who wrote that really easy-to-use web framework that isn't really even a web framework at all. Carson, how's it going?
Going pretty good. Thanks a bunch for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you. I like your format. It's different, and so it won't just be me it's sort of regurgitating my why HTMX is okay for some things talk. So yeah, going pretty well. It's warm here in Montana, or warm by our standards, 70 degrees. We had a good weekend of youth baseball, first weekend of youth baseball, so that's always a lot of fun. So I'm in a good mood.
That's fantastic. So here at Nate Hates Boring People, we don't really have a lot of questions, but we'll get through them. First one is, who are you?
Who am I? Well, my name is Carson Gross. I grew up in Northern California. I was actually born in San Francisco, and I've always had a very strong attraction to San Francisco as a city. But I grew up outside of Sacramento, and pretty rural area. Kind of grew up on like a hobby farm. My dad was a doctor, but he bought this kind of farm, like horse property, outside of Sacramento. So I grew up in a reasonably rural environment, and then grew up there, kind of normal, I guess Northern California experience, and ended up going to school in the Bay Area, which was definitely culture shock for me. I went to, I was pretty reasonably smart in my high school, and I was going to study computer science at Berkeley. And I went to Berkeley because I knew how to use a computer. And so, of course, and I went there and found out just how smart some people are and how good some people were with computers. And I ended up dropping out of computer science while I was there. And then kind of circled around a few different majors. I ended up graduating with an industrial engineering degree, but that was in like 98, I think. And nobody in the Bay Area. My wife was in going to school in the Bay Area still, and so I had to get a job in the Bay Area. And there's not a lot of industrial engineering in the Bay Area, but there were a lot. This was right around the dot com, like the tail end of the dot com boom. So there were a lot of software jobs, and I knew how to program a little bit, and so I ended up getting software jobs. Um, and so did that for a few years. Decided I really wanted to figure out this computer science thing. So I went back to grad school in computer science, and then kind of stayed in the Bay Area for a while. And then my wife and I left, went back up to Sacramento for a little bit. And then about 5 years ago, we moved out to Montana, to Bozeman, which is semi-Montana. They say Bozeman is the cool thing about Bozeman is you can see Montana from Bozeman. So um, and just it's sort of I was at a startup that in Sacramento that I loved. It wasn't a great business. It was called Lead Dino. It wasn't a great, like, I'm not super interested in affiliate marketing, which is what the software did. But it was a good business. It was a really good lifestyle business. Gave me like a lot of flexibility to go coach my kids in baseball and stuff like that. But unfortunately, it blew up. My two other co-founders just couldn't get along, and so sort of got pushed into a forced sale of that, and was kind of threw up my hands and was done with California for various reasons, and just moved out here and decided to take a crack at teaching. So now I'm teaching at Montana State. And actually, somewhat ironically, I teach the class that knocked me out of computer science at Berkeley now, the systems class, which is assembly and kind of a whole bunch of stuff like that.
What kind of a lesson is
kind of
that
a
for life? Like you fail at Berkeley, move to Montana? Is that
Yeah. Yeah, if you're not good enough for Berkeley, maybe you're good enough for Montana. I don't know. It's everything's so random and crazy. But if I had advice for myself when I dropped out, I would have said just stick with it. You'll be all right. Even if you fail the class once. I just wasn't used to. I still suffer from this a little bit. I think people who who are a little bit more, if you have a gift at something, it can kind of be a double-edged sword because as soon as you fail at it, it can be pretty devastating. Like I'm not used to failing at this, and I wasn't used to failing at school, and I did, um, I think that was a good thing. I've had a lot. It's funny. I was talking to my wife about this earlier today. Like some of the best things that have happened to me have been horrible things.
Yeah.
Like something really bad happened to me, and then I look back on it, I'm like, man, that really gave me something too. So it's hard when you're in it, and particularly if you're young, you don't have perspective. But when you get older, you start to see, okay, this makes sense, and it made me, stronger in this way, more able to deal with these things in this other way, or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of, and then HTMX got super popular last summer because the Primeagen covered it, and because Fireship Dev covered it, and so that's been a whole crazy thing too.
Yep, Primeagen, friend of the show.
Yeah, great guy. MSU alumni, coming back to Bozeman, Montana. So for Big Sky DevCon, which is a developers conference out here that we're trying to resurrect in June. He's going to be the MC for it, which is pretty big time. I mean, Bozeman's a small town, and MSU is a good school, but it's still a school in a I don't know if you can even call this place a city, but a place in Montana. And so the fact we're getting Primeagen out here is pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah, I hear there's going to be a lot of titans of industry. I've heard rumors that there might be a particular podcaster that runs a particular hateful of non-interesting people talking out there. But I mean, nothing's been announced, so we don't know. We don't know.
No,
we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. Yeah, I don't want to give away anything, but there should be. I've heard the term Flappy Bird. And
interesting.
Like
that's strange because I have a friend who built a Flappy Bird, and I'm working on a project with him.
Yeah,
using
things that don't
HTMX. Weird.
Yeah, I know. Things don't make any sense here in Montana. They really don't, but it's all good.
All right. So my second question, I already asked who you are. Second question, what do you do?
What do? I teach computer science, and I teach like database programming, which is SQL basically. Systems, which is sort of a soup to nuts how computing works, like from transistors up to cloud. And then I teach a compilers class. I like programming languages quite a bit, although I'm very practical. I don't like I'm not a big type system, like category theory guy. Like, man.
So no TypeScript, no Rust.
I don't mind TypeScript. TypeScript you can get crazy with. I think so. Listeners, if they've read grugbrain.dev, which is a website I kind of put up that's sort of a joke website.
I didn't talk about how there's until like an hour ago. I was doing some research. How are you everywhere? You're so like in the zeitgeist of this weird niche community of like kind of indie web dev types.
Yeah, I know. It's like a random, and I'm like not personality wise that person at all. I don't know, man. The internet is crazy.
You're the guy these days.
I know. It doesn't make any sense. I feel like, what's Chance the Gardener in Being There? Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
Watch Being There. It's Peter Sellers flick, I think. I'm going to butcher the names, but he's just this gardener that's like not really, he doesn't know what's going on. He's just this random guy, and he's not very smart, and everyone keeps taking these things that he says as being very profound, and so he ends up like being like a guru that the world leaders consult, and he's just this gardener,
like a Forrest Gump type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Forrest Gump but better.
That's funny. I'll have to check that out
without the horrifying like backstory of Forrest Gump. But anyways, it's been kind of cool to be able to contribute. And like, so in Greg Brain, to get back to the original thing, I talk about how I think there's an 80-20 rule with type systems. And there was a tweet, someone was like talking about like the AI generated this crazy type signature. I don't even remember. Someone was like, "Oh, hey, check this out. Like this is really good." And AI generated this, and then we the engineers analyzed it and figured out what it was doing. And like this is really good programming. And I'm like, man, that is crazy.
Yeah, it's like the
That is
thing where it's like a dumb developer says, "Wow, this is so complex, it must be smart." But a smart developer goes, "Wow, this is so simple, it was really smart."
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think you can overcook type systems for sure, and I feel like Rust suffers from that a little bit. At least some of the code that I've seen, and like the Haskell and so forth. So when I say I'm a programming language person, I like building programming languages, but the type system stuff I tend to keep pretty simple. So
Yeah, this is
we do
something.
we
Oh, sorry.
no, we have a static, like the language we do at MSU is statically typed. So I'm not opposed to a static type system, but we just keep it pretty simple.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like getting into the type system stuff, you end up stopping trying to program and you start trying to you stop trying to solve problems in the world with programming and you start trying to solve programming with type systems.
Yeah.
And at a certain point,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. You've got your entire universe developed into this tight type system, but like, have you helped anyone recently? Have you like made something nicer? Have you improved anyone's
Yeah.
life? Okay, no, great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I get it. Like you're trying to prove things. Like that's effectively what a type system is proving that the code's correct. And there's proof systems too that like, you can prove algorithms correct and so forth. But I just haven't found them to be, and I there's that T.S. Eliot quote that, we're constantly trying to design systems where nobody will have to be good. And it's like, that just doesn't work, like there's always going to be some dynamic, like it always comes in through the back door. So, I don't know. I'm not opposed to static type systems and even really elaborate ones. And I'm not going to tell someone who likes them that not to use them, but I think that my experience with them has been a mixed bag.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, in the third question here, what's your thing? What makes you tick?
What's
What
my
you know?
I really like making people laugh, like a
Okay.
whole bunch. I like coaching youth baseball and making people laugh. I do like programming, but I'm definitely a when the spirit moves me kind of guy. So I have to be excited to really hit coding hard. And when I've got an idea, like HTMX, okay, generalizing hypermedia controls. I could grind pretty hard on that for a little bit, but I like programming. I enjoy making stuff that does stuff. Like that's one of the things that I like about web programming,
Hmm.
and GUI programming in general. Like when you can like it does a thing. If there's a thing, you can click on it and it does something useful. I think that's pretty neat. So that's motivating to me. What else? What's my thing? Yeah, HTMX is obviously my thing, whether I like it or not at this point. Like that's what I'm going to be remembered for is HTMX. And I think it's a good idea. Like I've mentioned this before on podcasts. I wasn't a big hypermedia person. I was when I first got into like sort of corporate programming, when I was doing real programming for money. It was during what was they called it DHTML. How old are you? Do you remember
I
DHTML?
am
You look you're
27.
not young. Yeah, you're young. You're a youngin. You don't remember DHTML. It's all good. So DHTML was kind of JavaScript, the early version of like JavaScript, and I saw it and I just was like, ugh, the browsers, back then especially, the browsers were all very inconsistent, and there was a thing called Java Web Start, which was a way to build Java like thick applications and deliver them over the network to
I remember the
people.
Java
Uh,
applets that would show up over the
yeah,
network.
yeah. So imagine Java applets, but it was like a full application, and just like you can click on a link in Discord, it'll add a new channel to Discord. It was a very
Hmm.
similar process, but it would launch a whole Java app, and it would download all the jars over the net. And it was a pretty cool little setup. It probably still exists. but it was a way to build what I considered at the time real like applications. I was like, this web stuff is stupid. Like I did a little bit of CGI stuff, but it just felt super janky compared to like a real windowing toolkit. so I did that for a couple of years, and like then eventually the web just kind of got me. But when it got me, it was kind of begrudging, and there was a lot of like and there still is like people that I don't want to say people, but some people, the community around hypermedia and around the web even, like you can get some very disagreeable and like just nasty people. Like people, I get them like on Twitter. These people are like, your code sucks, your website sucks, everything sucks, you're horrible, you're a horrible person. Like a lot of like, like, what about accessibility, you're a horrible person. Like I'm like, I'm just a dude. Like, and so it's been like that forever. And so, I was kind of alienated by like back in the day, there used to be a lot of fights around REST and Hadios and so forth. So I really like when I created Intercooler, which was the predecessor to HTMX, it was very practical and not ideological at all. Like I didn't understand the web. I just wanted to make a thing work. And then I kind of backed into this understanding that was much more mature when I made HTMX. So now I've got a good, theoretical basis, and I feel like I understand things a lot better. But it's ironic, again, like I just find myself in a funny position where like I was initially I was pretty anti-web, like at least the early web, and I didn't understand hypermedia at all. And now I'm like the guy who talks about hypermedia probably more than anyone else
Yeah, I mean,
on
you
Twitter.
literally
Anyway.
wrote the book on it.
I wrote the book on hypermedia. Like, there was this great idea just sitting there with no one like talking about it. And I'm like, I don't know, man, maybe I'll just talk about it, I guess. So that's how we ended up here, I guess. But yeah, so that's kind of my thing, I'd say.
That's funny. So you already touched on this a little bit, but the next thing I always do is ask, can you give me your story starting at conception? Which I know is a conservative thing, but this isn't a political podcast.
Yeah. So I think I was conceived in Reno or outside Reno. That's
Thank you for answering that
guess.
question. Nobody actually goes to conception, and I
Yeah.
asked for it.
Yeah, no, I think I was. I think my name's Carson, and I think it's derived from a canyon outside of Reno,
That's fun.
and that's my guess. And then I was born in San Francisco, but my parents left San Francisco when I was very young, like one, so I don't remember San Francisco at all. And then I grew up in Sacramento, like riding. I rode 40 minutes to get to my friend's house. It was, it was a dirt road for the first 5 years we were there. And so, but the area I grew up in is now Richie Rich. It's called Granite Bay now. So, it changed a bunch when I was there. It was just California oak forests, which are really pretty from the above and then really ugly if you're down low, because they've got this acid, I guess, in their leaves or something that kills everything on the ground. So it's like all dirt, like dust underneath them. But the oak forests of California are really beautiful from, when you're looking at them. Shoot, it's just all chaos. I wrestled. I didn't play baseball. I played baseball for a little bit, and then I just ended up being really good at wrestling. So that's probably what I'm most wrestling. So I was most competent. I'm most competent to coach my kids than wrestling, but as I got older, I like baseball more. I don't know, man. went to college, like didn't know what I was doing. Lost my identity as a wrestler. Picked up a new identity as a hard drinking guy, and then met my wife and stopped doing that so much and had 3 kids, and here we are.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So if you wrestled, then how'd you get into coaching youth baseball?
I just like baseball. I just fell in love with baseball. I always loved it when I was a kid. Baseball is one of these sports where there are obviously people that are very naturally talented at it, but golf is the same way. I feel like, where if your dad, or fishing or hunting, there are these sports where if your dad isn't into it, like it's real hard to get into it. Like if your dad doesn't know anything about golf, like it's real tough to be a good golfer. And baseball is like that. And so my dad didn't like baseball at all. But I wanted, for whatever reason, it grabbed me when I was a kid, and I really wanted to be good at baseball, but just could never get there. And then when I had my kids, I kind of didn't want them to wrestle because of my experience with wrestling, particularly the dieting, was pretty negative. Like, I just didn't eat anything, and I was pretty miserable a lot.
Yeah, I grew up in
So
Iowa, and I remember seeing the wrestlers the
yeah.
day before a meet. They were all like bundled up in like 19 layers of
Yep.
clothes, and they had like a water bottle, and
Yep.
that was their only sustenance for like a day and a half, 2 days, and it looked awful.
It's not, and it's, you're growing, and, like, it's just a bad time. I don't know. So I don't begrudge, like, there's a lot I love about wrestling. There's no lying in wrestling, like, you
Yeah,
can't hide, it's you against another guy. And like, it's, either you win or he win. He wins. There's a lot of good aspects of it, but that my wife is she's not there's a certain culture to wrestling that my wife is not super, that's just not her thing. And so I was like, well, okay, what are other sports and that I like? And I just really liked baseball. So baseball was, so I got into that, and got my kids going early, started coaching it, and now I'm just obsessed. love love youth baseball. It's a lot of fun. Here in Montana, it's a tough season because it starts, like, the snow just melted like 2 weeks ago.
hmm
And then the season starts, and then it ends June when everyone leaves to go like camping and everything. So we've got 2 months to play baseball in, and it's not like in California, people play year round. So it's a much longer and much more, I would say, what do I want to say? The quality of baseball there is definitely a higher level than here. But it's just so much fun. So.
certainly. Uh, I gotta say, your last name is Gross. Did you ever get like bullied for that
Yeah.
growing up? Is that like a?
Yeah.
I feel like it's such an obvious
Yeah,
question. I have to ask.
yeah. No, I know. It's a horrible name. It's a horrible name. Life ain't easy for a boy named Gross, Like, my joke for that is like, yeah, things were pretty bad until fourth grade, and then my friend Trevor Cox started getting it pretty bad. Um, but um, the funny thing, it's not even a blood name. Like, I'm not, Gross is a German name. Like, and my dad was adopted, and so it means big in German, which I'm not tall. I'm a wrestler. Um, so it's like, or like, it means great, like gross means like great or whatever. But it's not a blood name. My I'm mostly Irish. Through, my mom was Gallahue and O'Rourke, and my dad, I think uh, he may have been a Taft or something like that. So like a bunch of Irish names. So I've always had this like weird German, like awful in America German name to contend with, and like, but culturally I feel much like, and I feel like I'm more just an Irish person. Kind of wish my last name was like, O'Rourke or something like that, one of the other
Oh,
background
Grossy.
names, because I
Yeah.
oh, gross, yeah. I guess it's America, we can do whatever we want here. So,
Yeah.
um,
Go
but
hop
yeah,
to it.
yeah, why not? Give me whatever. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a funny name. My grandparents who adopted my dad were amazing people. My grandfather they were Quakers. So if you want to get into weird religious stuff, like my grandparents were Quakers, or on my dad's side, and they were. My grandma was just one of these just heroic people that founded a bunch of library. You look back and you're like, that's just not real. Like, there's no way a person did all that. But she did. She was, they died when I was pretty young, but I remember them being very, very stoic German, Quakers. So, kind of interesting. I don't have much connection with Quakerism. So, but that's the history of it.
Interesting. Do you follow a religion or non-religious, spiritual?
Yeah, I'm super religious.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm very religious. I'm a Roman Catholic.
Roman
So
Catholic. Okay. I feel weird because I don't know very much about Roman Catholicism. I grew up Baptist, so like
yeah,
I guess you guys are like
Yeah,
Eh,
Whore of Babylon and all that
something.
stuff.
Yeah, there's something. I don't know, some connection or not. Maybe we hate each other. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I don't think. Yeah, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of anti-Catholic, like Baptists, which is fine. I get it. I mean, I'm an anti-Catholic Catholic sometimes, so I'm sympathetic.
I mean, aren't we all?
Um,
You know.
right. Yeah, I didn't grow up Catholic. I converted when I was older. So, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like it's what am I going to say? It's a good religion. I don't know. I can't recommend it to everybody, but
Definitely
it's a
top
good
10 religions.
yeah, top 10 easy. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it other than that's what I am.
No, fair enough. No, it's funny. I mean, some people talk about it a lot. Some people, it's very. I mean, it's a very personal thing. You know, I always clam up when people dig in on my sorts of opinions and things because it's like, well, it's so like personal
Yeah,
and so like unique to you how you express it and how you feel it and everything.
it is. It's also super dangerous,
Yeah, it's also
right?
very dangerous.
Right? Like, I mean, that's just the reality. Like, it's, easy. America has always suffered from, or for better or for worse, America has always had this, like, we need to figure out some sort of commonality despite having nothing in common with one another.
Yeah,
And so I think that's why Americans have such an aversion to talk, like, many Americans have an aversion to talking about religion because it just ends up causing discord.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, but yeah, this is one of those things like I'm happy to talk to any individual. I'm happy to talk about religion, but
Mhm.
I'm always a little worried about talking about it in general because you say something
Mhm.
that makes one person upset. And if you were face to face with that person, you could probably hash it out pretty well.
Yeah,
But it's just a video talking to you on YouTube.
yeah,
So
fair enough. That's
you
why I feel about a
assume,
lot of discourse. I mean, even on programming languages and stuff, something simple like that,
right,
where it's like, you know, you say something online and everyone goes, "Oh, well, you're an idiot," and you were just
yep,
talking about this, how you build a website and everyone goes, "Oh, well, you must hate disabled people because you didn't make it so a screen reader works really well," and it's like, yo, man, I'm just
right,
trying to build a website. I'll get to it. It's gonna be okay.
yeah. Yeah, there is online discourse is really dangerous in that regard. Like and I
Mhm.
fall victim to it all the time. I try not like now that my Twitter account's pretty big, I try not to like quote tweet people that say something mean about HTMX. And I still do it every once in a
Mhm.
while, but just because if I sat down with that person and just like had a 10-minute
Mhm.
conversation face to face, they'd see the point of HTMX and when it made sense and when it didn't. And similarly, if they've got their thing, then I'd that looks insane to me if I sat
Mhm.
down with them. It's not to say we wouldn't have disagreements, but just like when it's words or images on a screen, it depersonalizes it and makes it real easy to, you know, like as we can see, like the outrage is very easy. I feel it,
Yeah.
I'll read something and I'm like, oh God, how could you say that? And then it's like, well, they're just, they've got their life history and all that. And so
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about it. It seems like it's a real thing and it's a real destructive thing, and it has real world effects too.
Mhm.
Like, but I don't know what to do. The internet is really magical in many ways, but there's definitely some downsides
Yeah, the
there
good
as
part
well.
is it lets you connect with all sorts of people of all sorts of varying ideas, and then the bad part is that
Yep.
it lets you connect with all sorts of people of all sorts of varying ideas.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And like, you don't have that common, there's just sort of like norms, that make human communication possible, right? That like, okay, this person isn't going to get super offended if I say, like, given what even the way that I say something is going to be governed by like certain norms, and
Mhm.
so, and unfortunately, I think it means that like people who are polite or high conscientiousness, I think is I don't know the psychology that well, but I think highly conscientious people tend to get very quiet on social media because they don't want to offend anybody. And then it's only the people that are low conscientious, and so they're just like screaming at each other, and everyone else is like, whoa. So I don't know. How do you fix that? How do you make the polite people talk more? I don't know.
That's interesting.
Interesting,
I think you just make
interesting
the
question.
impolite people go outside more. I feel like that's a pretty good solution.
the touch grass solution.
The touch grass solution, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess we've mentioned HTMX a bunch, but I got a bunch of less technical viewers. Could you give like a TLDR on what HTMX is for like the layperson that isn't really into computers? It's a little tough. I was trying to do it the other
Yeah.
day, but
Yeah, I think like if you took HTML and you just made it more dynamic, that's the way. Like if someone, okay, the web, yes. Do you know what HTML is? Kind of. Okay, well, HTML is how the web works. Like it's this file format, which is just a way of writing things down, so that a web browser can understand them. And HTMX just makes HTML more powerful, so you can build cooler stuff with it. Um, so that's probably how I'd explain it to someone who's not super technical, just like, HTML more powerful though. So, which I think the name kind of captures that, HTMX, HTML extended, I think is what kind of made up. That's what it meant after the fact.
that's funny. So I want to get into some more like philosophy of software stuff because I think we both really agree on a lot of this stuff. The Grug Brain post is just very. It frames the entire thing in a way of like, hey man, I'm not so smart, but I still want to make software. And it turns out that even if you think you're so smart, maybe you're not that smart either. And if you just go simple, then everyone can enjoy this good software that works. And
Yeah.
I just see this so often in people I'm trying to teach and mentor and work with, where it's like they don't trust themselves to just go with the simple, intuitive, straightforward solution, and you
Yeah.
want to go for the most complicated, ridiculous, like using the newest, hottest algorithms and the newest, hottest technologies. I
Yep.
guess my question is kind of what brought you to that sort of standpoint and philosophy?
Yeah, I really think I had a job right after grad school where I worked at a company called Guidewire Software. And I was starting to get more confident as a computer programmer at that time, and they ended up putting me on what was called the platform team, which is basically the team that built the infrastructure. So they make insurance applications, and I ended up on the platform team, which was the team that built the infrastructure for those applications. And there were some really, really smart people on that team, like really smart people. And I just increased, and I remember, I think I've told this story before, but I remember in a meeting, we were trying to solve some problem. And I just said, I just think this is too complicated, the solution that was being proposed. I'm like, this is just too complicated, guys. And the lead on the platform team looked at me and said, "You know what your problem is? You give up too easy." And I like as I was a reason I was relatively I wasn't a junior, but I was not a senior either at the
Mm.
time, and I was just crushed by that. Like this guy that was a technical hero of mine would say that to me. And but as I got more mature and as I saw more and more software, I would think back to that and be like, I might have been right there. like but no one was going to stand up for me at that moment because they're not like then they would have to admit they were giving up too, or they were too stupid to see that this complicated solution was the right one. And so I just sort of developed this philosophy over time of like just do the dumbest thing that can work, that can possibly work, and that can lead to junky code. Admittedly, like junky code is bad, and I don't know what to say about it. But I've seen really smart people throw a huge number of abstractions at things and still end up with junky code. And so it's like, okay, well, if we're gonna have a huge number of abstractions in junky code or like just junky code, I'll just take just junky code. And so I just ended up moving more and more in that direction. Like, let's try and simplify things. And a lot of the like I disagree very strongly with a lot of the clean code recommendations,
Yeah.
and like overusing it. Like there's no silver bullet. Overusing abstraction, like don't repeat yourself. Well, maybe, but sometimes it's actually cleaner to repeat yourself. Like if you've got three or four pieces of code that are close to one another, and that you have to like inject in like four callbacks to make like to extract the common part, right? Like just leave it. Just leave the three or four. duplicated code and don't create some monster method that takes 4 callbacks to encapsulate that. Or, even worse in Java, like create like a parent, some crazy object hierarchy that like dynamically dispatches these things. And now you got to trawl around to figure out what the heck's going on. So,
So you don't
um,
like the mega object factory?
yeah, factories. I'm like, there's already a factory. It's called new. So like, let's think hard about new, and like, do we need to make new more dynamic? Do you need to be able to new up an interface, and maybe that provides like a default implementation of that interface if it's been registered? Like, we've already got one of those things, so like, let's not create a bunch of other ones that are, especially in Java. I just got in trouble for saying this about Java, but like, Java just has this real bad tendency to go super crazy with like the number of abstractions. I'm in favor of fewer. Particularly, I don't mind like internals, whatever. Do whatever you want that makes the most sense for the internals of a module, but the interface that you present to other people should be as simple as possible.
Yeah, I
And
just realized this like a few months ago. I mean, I kind of had come to it, but I never like put it into words. Where it's like there's going to be there's going to be complications everywhere. There's going to be complicated stuff. You got to do difficult things, but like you should just start with making the interface that makes the most sense for what you're trying to do, and
Yep.
then work out everything in the back end and try to
Yeah.
hide the complex, ugly parts someplace where they're all in one place and you can get to them, and you test that part, and then the rest is
Yep.
easy, and you just have these real nice, clean, easy to use, file. You got read, write, seek, and that's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100. I love that style of development where you're like,
Mhm.
okay, this is what the API should look like for an idiot that's like doesn't care about the details of my stupid library. This is one, like a lot of developers, they get excited about something, and so they create this super elaborate library that handles all these like things, and then the person who comes in to use that library doesn't care and doesn't know and doesn't have time to become an expert in that area. And so if you can come with that mindset that you just outlined of like, okay, what's the API for the guy who's like got 10 minutes to like figure this API out and just wants it to work? What's that API look like? Design that, implement it however it takes, like, test it well and all that sort of stuff. And then, one thing in the Grug Brain essay that I talked about is layering your API. So, okay, so now you've got this like relatively simple API. Okay, make it possible to get at the internals, like
Mhm.
callbacks, or, maybe there's a more complicated API or whatever. Like, just a good example that I was just looking at is the Java Sockets API. So the Java Sockets API is like super low level, and it's at least you don't have to worry about byte ordering and stuff like that. But it's still like you're still sending bytes and dealing with bytes. And if you want to get around that, if you want to do what normal humans do, which is send strings over sockets, right? Like, you've got to put a bunch of wrappers around things and all this junk, and it's like that stuff should be on socket. Like, if I was designing that library, socket would have like a write method that took a string, and then you'd be able to get to the byte level, like for people that are doing hardcore
Mhm.
stuff and need to get down to that level for sure. But like for normies, like they just want to open a socket and send a string across. Like, make that doable without them having to know about like buffered input readers and like all
Yeah.
this kind of junk. Like, I don't know, man. So I don't know. It's just so I agree very strongly with you. Like, design the API for the non-expert first, and then kind of back into what your implementation looks like from there.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples of the simple API that you can get into the internals of is like the Go HTTP handler, where you're given
Okay.
a reader and a writer, and you
Hmm.
read the request in, and then you do whatever you
Mhm.
want with it, and then you write on the writer that's it's just writing to the client at the other end. And then if you
Right.
want, you can call hijack on it. And what that does is it just says, all right, Go, we know you've been handling the internals of all this nonsense, but I'm taking
Yeah.
over here. I'm the captain now.
Yeah.
And it is the most
Sure.
complicated, ridiculous crap you've ever seen. But if you ever need it, it's right there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
I
called
think
it
that's
once in my 5 or 6 years of programming Go professionally.
Yeah, there's an art to that, which
Mhm.
but I think that's good. That's like designing APIs is an art. And, again, I think that there's too little attention paid to the non-expert. Like people are going to use this who are not experts. So let's think about them first.
Yeah.
And then, okay, the semi-expert, the person who's willing to put in a day or two to figure out some stuff, they should probably have an API that's a little more complicated. And then the people that really want to get down into the muck, fine, like we'll have a very raw API for them that exposes all the internals and details so they can do whatever they need to.
Yeah, that's one of the things I find interesting, like comparing different languages, because I like to learn and play around in all the different languages. Like I mentioned Rust before. Rust, like every single thing in Rust, every abstraction, every API, every library, you got to sit down and read it for like an hour before you can use it at all. There's no, yeah, just import it and do the thing. It's like, all right, man. Hope you didn't want to do anything with your afternoon to, unmarshal a JSON.
Yeah. Oh, I know. That's strings. I joke about strings and Rust, but I'm like,
Oh, you mean
I was,
strings or ampersand stir, or do you mean
yeah,
string?
yeah, exactly. Or do you mean like, what is it? What is it? UTF 32 or 64 array or something? There's like,
Or do
there's
you want a
just, it goes
box
on
arc
and
string?
then right. And then there's C stir and then on and on.
I don't know
And,
what you don't get
I'm just
about a
like,
box arc vex string.
yeah, I
It's
know.
easy.
Yeah. It's, and the thing is there are people I work, there's a kid that is at Montana State who loves Rust and can do a lot with it. But I'm just, it's too much for me. Skill issue, I guess, but,
Skill issue.
too much for me. It's all good though. I'm glad they're Rust. I'm just, same thing with Lisp, same thing with
Mhm.
Haskell. Like we got a guy coming to Big Sky DevCon who's going to give a talk on Haskell. And I'm like, holy smokes.
Oh,
Did
sick.
not
A
program in
bathroom
that
break.
language.
You didn't hear me say
Yep.
that.
No,
I didn't say that.
no, no. He's super. His name's Tony. He's a sharp guy, super sharp guy. So I'm excited to see. He likes hyperscript too. So that to me is indicative of an open mind about programming. He's not, because if he's willing to use Haskell and then hyperscript, which are as far apart as any languages I can possibly imagine to build software, like this is a man with a flexible mind.
That's funny. So I'm curious, what like if you could give a ranking of what languages you like to work in and what languages you don't like to work in.
I guess I like Java. I don't like it. There's a lot, like I've got a huge number of criticisms of the programming language. I haven't programmed enough in Go. I like the thing that I really like about Java is I like the object oriented like model of like fields and methods on a class.
Mhm.
Like I like that. And I think, with Go, you don't do that, right? You have kind of like structs and then you glue, in my understanding anyways, is you kind of glue methods on the side. And I think that makes a lot of sense if you come from the C world, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and so, but I like the Java model of like just call the thing a class and put the
Mhm.
fields on it and put the methods on it and then call them. I really like Go's implicit interfaces, like the idea that you don't have to implement an interface. You just, if it satisfies the interface, that's good enough. I think that's really, really nice. And I wish Java had that. Um, I programmed in Ruby for a long time, for like a decade, and there's not I'm just not a huge Ruby guy. I know how to program in it pretty well at this point, but I just for whatever reason there's no one programming language I can point to and say like I'm that kind of programmer. Like TypeScript, I kind of tried to take a look at, and TypeScript's basically C sharp, like a C sharp linter for for JavaScript. And so there's aspects I like about it. There was a programming language called Gosu, which was a JVM programming language, which was part of that team I was talking about at Guidewire. And that programming language has a lot of the features that I would like in a programming language. Maybe a few too many. And the interoperability with Java particularly when it came to generics, was pretty, I think, made the language a lot more complicated than it needed to be. So I just have to, Java is what I typically program in. So I guess I'm a Java guy. Sorry to disappoint everyone, but
Oh no. Oh no. That's funny because you're not
yeah.
wearing a suit. You don't work in like New York City at a big scary office building.
Yeah. I don't have like cuffs like this big with like the banker shoes or
The
whatever.
squared off brown leather shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah, and there's like I wish Java started up faster, like gosh, it's a Go. I'm interested in doing a new programming language kind of based on HyperScript. And I was like, oh, I'll do it in Go and I'll really get into Go and learn Go. But Go doesn't support dynamically loaded code. Like you can't load up a Go library dynamically at runtime in a way that you can. The JVM lets you do that. And I guess there's a plugins. I might be wrong on this, but my understanding is there's a plugins API, but then the library has to be designed specifically as a plugin, and no one uses it, and so
Yeah,
it's just not going to work.
I used it one time, like 5 years
Yeah.
ago, right when I was getting started. Actually, it was on the first Go app I ever, like, first proper Go app that I ever like had users on, and
Whoa.
even then, it was like, hey man, we have this, but like,
Yeah.
you're not going to use this, right?
Nobody does. Nobody does this.
Nobody
It's
does
here,
that.
but don't do it.
You could just,
Yeah. Yeah.
you could just dynamically load in C libraries, some .so files, easy.
Uh, yeah, I know. And someone was like, "Oh, because I kind of poked around a little bit. My idea was like, oh, you know what Go needs? You know what Go needs is it needs a tickle. Like tickle was to see as this new programming language will be to Go, right? Like something that you can like glue Go libraries together with and use Go for the high performance stuff, but use this library or use this other scripting language for the low for dynamic stuff. And but I just as soon as I saw you can dynamically load Go code, it was like, well, that's too bad.
Interesting.
Maybe one of your listeners will chime in with a good way to do it, and then I'll take a crack at that.
Well, now I'm thinking of how I would do it, and it would be really bad because what you'd do is you'd have it generate a script that exposes every public part of an interface or a struct or whatever. It just exposes it, and then compiles that when you click load. So then you're compiling 1,000 times every time you run a script, which would be not actually the worst thing because the Go compiler is pretty fast, but still like pretty bad.
Yeah, well, and then you'd cache it, but that's just so much infrastructure, man.
Yeah.
Holy smokes!
And like
Like
caching
the
incremental compilation on Go is not a thing because it compiles fast enough.
Yeah, and so the JVM, you've got class loaders,
Yeah.
and you can just create a new class loader, point it at a jar, and say, okay, let's start loading classes out of that, and that's what I really wanted. So I may end up, if I ever do that programming language, unfortunately, I think it's going to be on the JVM. And then I'm like, okay, well now startup time sucks because it's the JVM and they never cared about startup time. So let's look at like GraalVM. GraalVM is the project that makes Java fast and you can compile to a native image, kind of like Go has.
Yeah.
But then of course in GraalVM, you can't dynamically load code either. So it's like,
turns out dynamic loading and fast are not.
No,
does it.
there's no reason it should. There's no reason it has to be slow. There's absolutely no reason it has to be slow. And I'm not going to create my own virtual machine to demonstrate that fact. Someone smarter than me has to make both of those things work.
The GVM, the gross virtual machine.
Gross virtual machine. It'd be gross, all right, boy. I don't know. That's a big project. So
that's funny.
I'm just gonna I'm gonna do the standard thing and complain about it rather than actually fixing it.
I mean, that's good. That's like, I mean. From what I've seen, that seems to be like 100% of the work.
Yeah, no, well, so there's, I know this is totally inside baseball in Java. So Java has does Go have hot swap? Like you can change the code and like in a running executable, like reload and have like the code update. Is that a thing in Go?
If by that you mean you shut down the entire application, rebuild it, and then rerun it.
Oh boy, that's not what I mean. That is not what I mean.
I was hoping there was a chance. No, there's no such thing.
Okay, so the great thing about Ruby on Rails when you're doing Rails development is like you change a little bit of code and you hit refresh and the new code executes and it's
Mm.
amazing. I don't have to recompile none of this dumb stuff. So it sounds like Go does not have that, but the Go compiler's fast enough and Go, developers are aristocrats, so they have, they can sit there and think about philosophy while
Indeed.
while things
Yes.
while things are
Yes, we do.
reloading. Right. But in Java, it's so like they've got this thing called hot swap where it'll load in new bytecode and replace old bytecode. And so this thing, it's there and it works as long as you don't change the signature of a method or like delete a class or like you can't do anything that matters. Basically. So like if you're just like tweaking the internals of a function, you can click compile and it'll reload. And so that's like I was in Java and then I went to Ruby and I experienced this like ability to just write code and reload it immediately and it was amazing. And I realized how bad hot swap was. Went back and like this guy because I was involved in gosu, I went to the JVM language summit, which was this thing. I don't know if it's still going on, but for a while there were a lot of different programming languages coming out for the JVM, like Kotlin and Clojure and all this stuff. And so I went to, I think it was the 2009 JVM language summit, and this guy named Thomas Worthinger gave a demo where he demonstrated full hot swap. So like you could change anything. You could change method signatures, like you could add classes, remove classes, the whole thing. And it just like worked. And he showed it and he demonstrated it. And I was like losing my mind in the audience. It was the only demo that I cared about in the whole thing. And the whole time the JVM engineers were sitting there telling him that's impossible. And he'd like show it and he's like, no, see, it works. And they're like, no, that's impossible. And I'm like, dude, he's showing you right now that it's working. So that was in 2009 and it's 2024 and the JVM still does not have complete hot swap. It still doesn't work. It's still the same broken ass stuff that been since like 2005 or whatever. And Thomas Worthinger is now working on Graal VM and his like full hot swap implementation has been rolled into that project, but no one uses it, like, because no one uses it. It's just so crazy how technology like that just, it's governed not by technical like merit. It's just because he wasn't on the right team at Sun at the time. And so here we are a decade and a half later, like restarting our JVMs because they wouldn't listen to Thomas back in 2009.
I mean, restarting the JVM's not so bad. It just takes, 20 gigs of RAM and it spins your
Yeah,
computer up
20.
and
Well, and yeah, you get to like,
your
how
house.
many you're in your stupid web app and you're like 4 clicks deep or whatever, and you've got like all this state set up in like caches and blah blah blah, and you're like, well, I guess I got to restart the server. Like, it's just so dumb.
Sir,
All this
initiating
wiki-
restart of JVM.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the Death Star when they start powering up the cannon. Oh man.
That's funny. It's weird seeing what sorts of things are like just totally normal in different programming areas and what sorts of things are totally like so out there that don't make sense. I am not explaining it well, but like I guess I kind of come from I learned on my own. I took like 2 computer science classes in college and realized I was wasting my time. So I kind of learned on my own. I learned from all like the old the Unix old heads and everything and like C and that sort of thing. So like I'm used to like print line debugging and just restarting the program and whatever. And so I write Go and it's like, why would I run the debugger? What am I, stupid? I have fmt.println. That's how you debug things. I got the debugger right here, right up here. And then, you go over to like watch somebody game program and they're like they have this like dynamic like loading stuff in and changing stuff and that's just normal for them. And then you go over to the Lisp guys and they're like, oh yeah, we've had all of that since 1973. And it's like, all right, Lisp guys.
Right.
If you would shower, I'd let you in my house and you could tell me this, but
yeah, I know. Like I'm a big fan of the debugger because I think it helps students develop that like ability to emulate code in their head, which is really important as a computer programmer. But a
Mhm.
lot of people hate the debugger, in part because it's so hard to start a debugger, and then you have to attach it and like just ugh, like the Java tool, Java suffers from this in the tool chain, like, and Go to an extent,
Yeah.
where like you have to compile something. Like most people, when you're just getting into computer programming, like what's compiling? What
Mhm.
does that mean? Oh, well, you've got to, I want to run this program. Okay, well, in Java, like Java, worst case scenario, right? Okay, we got to create a class. What's a class? It's a thing. And like, okay, so how do I write a program though? Well, you don't. You write a class. Okay, but how do I start? Well, you create a function called public static void
Public static
main.
void main.
And you're like, and okay, so I did that. I don't know what that means, but I put some stuff in it, like a print line or something like that. So now what do I do? Well, now you Java C it. Okay, so Java C it didn't do anything. It like yelled at me about something. Like, oh well, you got to fix compilation error, and like, okay, I got it to work, and it made this weird dot class file. Like, okay, well, now what you do is you run Java C. Which one? Java. Now run Java and pass that class name in. What's a class name? Well, it's you take the path that file's at and you turn all the slashes into dots. Are you on Windows? Okay, it's backslash. Turn backslash into dots, and then now you run that, and then it'll work. Maybe. Okay, well, I'm using this other thing. Well, did you include it on the class path? What the is a class path, man? Shut up.
It's like, yeah,
You
it's
know?
it's com.sun.universe.theworld.thing.space.stuff. How do you not know this?
So like, and that's another example where like, I just like if you just yeah, I don't know. It could be a lot better. Debug it. Start the debugger on a port. What's a port? Shut up. It's just put a print line in there, man.
Oh
It's all
man,
good.
that's so funny. Yeah, it's like by the time you spun up the debugger, I could have added 80 print lines.
hmm And you need the print lines anyways because you're going to be shipping it to some, virtual server somewhere, and you like when stuff goes wrong in production, you're not going to debug it. So,
You do bare
um,
metal, or are you into the cloud thing?
dude, I'm so bad at that. In the startup, I was not the ops guy. There was me, one other tech guy, and then a business guy. And the other tech guy he was the ops guy, and he was like all in on AWS. So I have no opinions on it, except I really liked Heroku. Heroku was awesome for a guy like me
That's funny.
before it got bought out by Salesforce. So I think if I was doing a startup now, I'd probably start on AWS and then
Mhm.
maybe try to move to something a little closer to the metal.
That makes sense. So we're kind of coming near to the end of our time here, but before we started recording, and I was
Yeah.
like dicking around with all of my stuff, making it work, and we had this like ground loop issue, and there's like a low buzz in my microphone, so I had to go get a different power supply for my computer because my computer's plugged into my audio interface, and the audio interface was interfering, and whole thing.
Yeah.
Carson, you dropped one of the greatest lines. I mean, this should be in like a book of poetry here. It's
Yeah.
the real world keeps getting. All right, this is a problem. My handwriting is very bad. The real world keeps intruding on our digital dreams.
Yeah. The real world keeps intruding on the digital dream, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, and it's funny. That's the funny. Like, there's like, you can get mad about it, but it's so funny the way things are. I think we'll see the same thing. Like a lot of people are freaked out about AI, and that's not to
Mhm.
say that technology never like comes in and really screws with things. Like I think there's a lot of very negative things that have happened via technology.
Yeah, I mean, remember when all those no-code tools came in and put us all out of business?
Yeah. Yeah, it just there's this thing in the universe where things never work out quite the way you expect.
Yeah. Or like
And
when high-level languages came in and put all of the assembly programmers out of business.
right.
Or when they invented the
Like
computer and put everyone out of business.
yeah, right. Well, and like, it's not to say that stuff never happens. Like
Mhm.
Perl devs got hammered by Java. Like that's, I always say like, okay, like there are real world ramifications of these technology changes, but
Mhm.
there's also just like there's a spark in the universe that's like always like, nope, not that way. And there's gonna be some weird curl to it. And something unexpected is going to come out of it. And so I'm not, I think people that freak out about AI taking everyone's jobs are, boy, this, without getting political, like there has to be a social safety net for people because stuff happens, weird, crazy stuff happens. And so you have to like be able to be humane to people whose lives, like people live lives on human time scales. And so, you can't throw some guy out on the street with his family because AI made something not work anymore or whatever. But at the same time, like I've just noticed, like things never work quite the way the ideologues say in any way. Like the free market guys, like it never quite works that way. Like the socialist guy just never ends up working quite that way. There's like a little twist to the universe that is always there and always makes things a little different. And I find that very funny now because you know it's coming, and then yep, there it is. Look at that. So yeah, the real world does have a way of getting on you.
Absolutely. Oh, I remember. I was going to ask if you had any advice for someone who struggles with managing complexity in their software systems.
Yeah. Say no. Say no to stuff. Say no to if you can. If you have enough institutional power to say like we're just not going to do that, or even internally like I'm just not going to do that. I think that's a really powerful tool for controlling complexity. And then, if you're a senior person, the problem is a lot of this boils down to human power dynamics, right? Like the decisions aren't made because they're the right technical decision. They're made because the person with power to make the decision decided that this was the best way to do something. And so what that means for us is like, especially as you develop power in an organization, is if you can start saying like, this seems too complicated to me. Then that, from a position of power, then, if that guy back at Guidewire had been like, you know what, Carson, like, I get what you're saying. Let's think about this. Is this really worth it? Even if he had ended up, saying like, we're going to do this anyways. If he had just approached that with a little bit more of a, we value the idea that we value the idea of simplicity of implementation. Then I think that would have been positive for that team. So that's what I would say. I think younger people who are just coming into it, I think they should worry less about it because they're not in a position to make decisions, like it's on the elders, it's on the seniors. I think the younger people just kind of have to, the way that humanity is set up, you just kind of have to follow the lead of those people and fighting it. Like I fought a lot of battles when I was younger that if I could go back, I would have said, just don't fight that battle. It's not worth it. Like just do either do it the way you want to do it and then ask for forgiveness, or just do it the way they asked you to do it. And then when it blows up, like accept the blame. Because that's what's going to happen anyways.
That makes sense. Interesting. Well,
yeah.
I think it's about time to wrap up. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, comments, ideas, critiques.
No, no. This is fun. I like this. It's just kind of just fun to talk about like non-technical stuff. I'm looking forward to hopefully hanging out a little bit at Big Sky DevCon, and it'll be fun.
Absolutely.
Hopefully good summer. Summers are better for me from an open source standpoint because I actually have time to work on stuff.
That's great. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks again, Carson, for coming on the show. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, follow Carson on Twitter at htmx_org. Fly out to Montana for the
Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah, fly out to Bozeman, Montana. Definitely do that.
Stay in Belgrade, Montana. Don't stay in Bozeman. Bozeman's super expensive.
Okay, got it.
Stay in Belgrade, Montana, or Three Forks, which is beautiful.
Definitely make sure to watch all the videos that come out of that. I'm not going to say that I know exactly who's going to be there, but let's just say a certain 6'5" cool guy that runs a podcast may or may not be speaking there. I don't know.
There's some good-looking people. There's some good-looking people that are giving talks. Let's just say it. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. Yep. All right. I don't know how to say. I don't know how to end it. I need like an out screen.
I don't know, man.
All right, I'm gonna kill the